Welcome, everyone, and thank you for watching our exclusive customer webinar, AI at OrbitalFire, an inside look at our strategy. AI is moving fast and is creating both real opportunities and real risk all at the same time. In this recording, you'll hear Reg walk through our internal AI policy and help you with yours through important tips that you can take back and use right away. Due to some small technical difficulties during the live webinar, you'll hear us jump in just a couple seconds after Reg started the discussion, and I promise you aren't missing anything critical to the conversation. With that, we hope you'll enjoy our discussion of AI at OrbitalFire.
I'll talk about that. We started a few things very late. I'll talk about that as well. But we feel like we are in the same boat, the same condition and situation that most of our customers are, which is we are learning as quickly as we can, but cautious because we have things that we rely on and we have customers that rely on us. And so we've made some very deliberate decisions. But I think, as I've been thinking more about this over the last year or so, like intensely spending time deliberately figuring out what is our strategy here, what's it going to look like, practically speaking, what are the assets we need to develop, and how does this affect the business? I started spending a lot more time figuring out, well, what is everyone else doing, and what's the general sentiment of this? So I have selected a few charts that I think are really meaningful in terms of where we are and how we see this. I'm going to give you all of the references to these charts and metrics and stats at the end. But I think generally speaking, we are on this chart somewhere between 2 and 3, probably. I think, because we understand it fairly well today, we didn't 2 years ago. We certainly didn't, a year ago even. But we've invested a lot of time. And I would argue that I am actually behind some of my employees in terms of understanding. So that's very fair to say. But we're somewhere in a 2 to 3, and it looks like most of America, most of humanity is somewhere between a 2 and 3 right now in terms of their concerns about what's happening here with AI. Now, the concerns aren't just fear. Fear is certainly one of them. Like, there is a significant percentage of our population, our global population, that is concerned about things like, hey, is AI going to destroy jobs or replace human beings, or is it going to obviate the need for the human species? Like, it gets to that level, and I have seen some really alarming numbers in terms of people's concerns there. But I think there's a general concern. Let's just call it that for now. And I think most of us are at least somewhat concerned for 1 or 10 reasons about this proliferation of AI and computers and code that is making sentient decisions. Digging into this a little bit, in that same article, I'll share again the reference here. What are the issues? Well, some of them are very obvious, and for me, really the most, I would say, impactful to our business, which is misinformation, scams, organizations. So right now, I'll be honest, we're competing for a web application penetration test for a brand new potential customer. And that customer is talking to a competitor of ours. And we gave them a price, and the competitor gave them a price. This is some very sophisticated work that was about 80% less than what it would require us. And just to make this a little more interesting and give it some context, we actually know the contacts at the business. So we gave them basically our cost. Like, there's zero profitability, which we don't normally do. I mean, we have to survive too. But we did this at cost, and we were still 80% more expensive than this competitor. When they shared some information about what the competitor was doing, it became very clear that all they were doing was asking ChatGPT to go through code and look for vulnerabilities. And we have to compete with that. Like, we know that that's out there. I say to everyone, as it relates to AI, like, we now live in a volcano, so it doesn't make any sense to spend all our time thinking about how we avoid lava. It's like, we're in the situation, we need to deal with it. But misinformation is a huge issue, particularly in cybersecurity, where our industry loves to scare and shame and bully, but certainly confuse. Most of what we do today to, the general populace of small businesses in this country is just short of voodoo. And so that's a real problem for us because AI slop is out there, whether it's social media or marketing collateral. We know that people are just saying whatever they want to, or they're trusting a computer to do that on their behalf. But then there are things that showed up. So in sixth place, slaughterbots, which I had to look up. I didn't even know what this was. So a slaughterbot is essentially automated and essentially autonomous military technology, armament, weapons, things like that. So people are just as concerned about slaughterbots as they are misinformation, if you trust these numbers. Now, it does get serious. And so just articles over the last couple of weeks, we have seen some alarming things going on in AI. And I don't necessarily mean alarming from a fearful standpoint, but just alarming in terms of oh my God, I can't even picture how that would happen. But in this case, an Anthropic employee, a researcher who was building a module of Anthropic's sort of larger AI base and capability here it is. I mean, they were having lunch in the park. And they got an email from this platform, this product that they were building that the researcher believed was isolated, segregated, had no access to the internet and certainly to his email or an ability to email him. However, this product emailed the researcher and started bragging about its ability to climb these garden walls or defeat the boundaries that were in place or put in place by this researcher. So they were shocked. I was flabbergasted just to think about this. I do understand code, I mean, immensely and intimately. I've been coding since I was 13 years old. And for this to happen, really difficult for me to even get my mind around, but it gets even more mind-boggling, almost eye-watering. So this is a screenshot of a website called Moltbook. And in the last 3 months, another security researcher or just an AI researcher was experimenting with capabilities. And it asked one of these platforms to clone Reddit, which all of you have seen and probably use on a regular basis, to clone Reddit, but to create a version of Reddit called Moltbook that would only allow registration and enrollment from agents, AI agents. And you can see the numbers here, almost 200,000 agents, AI agents, signed up for this service, and they collectively submitted almost 2 million posts in 3 months. And here are some of the posts at the bottom. These are code bases. These are computers with code and large language models who are conversing without any human interaction. None. There are no humans on this platform. It doesn't allow humans to register. So when I saw this, and there's a whole story, and I'll give you the reference in the slides here, I really struggled to think about how this was even possible. No matter how good of a coder or what fantastical ideas you can come up with, the idea of computers completely independent of human beings interacting socially and with context. If you read these posts at the bottom here, they are talking to each other, and they are talking to each other in a way that humans might. And so this idea of robots, AI, synthetic human beings interacting socially is just something that's beyond my capacity. I have no way to adjudicate what's going on here. I can't process it. And I recognize that leaves me and my company at a deficit. But I think it's really important to understand that this is the level of depth and research that we have gone into and the level of awareness that we have about, hey, these things are happening at our customers as well. Like you are experiencing the same kinds of things. So what's happened? Well, no surprise here that skepticism is the number one change. So in the last couple of months, and it's in here, so since December, so 4 months, how has sentiment changed on AI over the last 4 months? And again, no surprise that skepticism is the number one change. It's up 8 points, and it's probably accelerating in that direction. But I think even more importantly is where I feel like I am. I don't think I'm necessarily skeptical. In fact, I am I am wholeheartedly excited. And some of the things I'm going to share with you today, I hope you'll be excited about. The ways that we are using AI and other related technologies is super exciting for me because I'm very much a process person. I am very much like solidly focused on what is the data. Your opinion's important, but I need to see the data. Like that's the way my brain works. So for me, I'm not necessarily skeptical, but overwhelmed, absolutely. And we see this accelerating as well. My guess is that most of you, if you had to pick one of these emotions right now, that overwhelmed would be at the top of your list, which is I don't even know if I'm skeptical or excited. There's so much data and so much stimulation and feedback out there about this topic that I'm not even sure where to start. And so this presentation is for you because honestly, for me, I am overwhelmed. I am pushing through it. Certainly, we have people here who are far more expert in this journey than I am, and I'll talk about that. But I'm overwhelmed. So let me start at the beginning. I want to give you a baseline of how we see AI and related technologies, what they are specifically, how we are using them, when we started using them, and their specific applications. I want to share our policy with you, or snippets of it. And by the way, we have shared our actual, we call them robots. So robot acceptable use policy with a number of customers. It's open source to our customers. If you want to see our policy, we'll share the actual document with you in the hope that it spurs some ideas and helps you think about how to govern this thing. But let me start with the very basics, which is the way we think about AI is in more general terms, because there are other computers, there is other code, there are other assets that we leverage immensely to make our business profitable, and profitably because we're very, very efficient. We support tens and tens of thousands of users today, and we're only 6 years, we're not even 6 years old yet. So our growth has been staggering, and we do a lot of that work with computers. And because of that, we can keep our prices low, and we have to because we only work with small organizations. But what are robots to us? First, in the most primitive form, workflow rules. So these are in most cases, or in almost every case, this is capabilities built into software platforms that we use to run our business, like a CRM, a ticketing system, financial applications. Every one of those provide us the ability to set up workflow rules, and we use them immensely, and we have for a long time. So this is the most basic form of robots. It's a computer doing the work, and that's kind of the definition of this robot for us. We know that robotic process automation, specifically as an industry and a niche, has been around for a very long time. We looked at this in day one at OrbitalFire. It was the technologies and the platforms were really only designed for enterprises. It was way overkill for us and way too expensive. So, 6 years ago, we didn't even really think more than a consideration about this, but it is included in this. Machine learning, we're doing quite a bit here in the machine learning, which is basically a conditional engine that takes known classes of stimuli or responses and can formulate different decision and decision making going forward. So basically, it's just learning from itself. Think of the very first chess games, right? Digital chess games, where your opponent can learn how you play by capturing the stimuli in your moves, and then just recording those things and then getting better over time. We have many of our platforms are third-party platforms that we use to deliver you services today. Almost all of them are using some kind of machine learning, which means they get better over time because they understand what's normal, they understand what's abnormal, and they can help us focus on things that are anomalies. And then last on this list are the two types of AI for me. The first is generative, which is kind of today I think of it as more of a glorified search engine, or it's sort of the most primitive form of AI, which you do a search, a Google search, and it comes back with the top things, but it writes something out. And all it's doing is aggregating all of that information, much of it misinformation or just opinions and editorial. So it correlates, aggregates and correlates all that information and gives you its best response. Keep in mind, AI, one of the problems it has is it is trained to provide a response. It can't just say, I don't know. It's not programmed to do that. It's actually not capable of doing that. So there's inherent vulnerabilities in just the fundamentals. But generative AI, which might be writing a blog post or a social media post, it might be, if we provide some, let's say, compliance assessment scores, hey, give us a general summary of this for a peer review. Okay, it's just generative. This is the most basic form. Then there's agentic AI, which is much more autonomous. It is context sensitive. It is multimodal in many cases, and it is more complicated processing. So you give it a series of steps, and the output to one step becomes the input to the next, and it can learn and make, cognitive-ish, certainly contextual decisions on its own, autonomously. Now, all of these technologies exist today in large form, and we're using every one of them. We call them robots. We needed a term that described better this idea of computers and code doing work for us, or doing work on behalf of our humans, not the synthetic ones. So robots is the way we think about this. And so I will use that term here pretty much very loosely. In terms of our timeline, as I mentioned, there were some things that we did very, very early. We knew that for us to survive only working with the smallest of organizations, that we had to run a very clean, very tight, process-driven, repeatable, data-centric business. If we were going to be profitable and survive this, we had to do that. So we invested very heavily in workflow rules that were built into the platforms that we engage in. In fact, some of the platforms that we selected as the backbone of our business, one of the heaviest weighted criteria was, can you automate a lot of the stuff that's repetitive or is really data-driven? So workflow rules we've been doing literally since day one. And in the first 6 months of our business, we had a huge library of workflow rules so that robots were doing some of the work for us. We did that for years. As I said, we've got some folks here who have really sort of pushed the curve in AI capabilities. Marketing is one of them. Our marketing team has been using AI in one form or another since 2023. So whether that was, helping us analyze the highlights of a webinar that we did, what were the most salient points or important headlines that we wanted to, the sound bites, what did we want to pull out of a webinar, to, using or writing an entire blog post that would, in the future be edited by a human. Also machine learning, as I mentioned, many of the actual tools that we use today has machine learning built right into it. I would not argue that it was AI, but certainly it does get better over time. And I can talk about some of those specifics in a different one. And then fast forward to really 2025, all the way to today, when agentic AI, RPA, and newer versions and releases of generative AI became more relevant and prominent. We started looking at, hey, how can we use this stuff to do things where humans are busy today, but not adding a lot of value, right? So, and that's kind of, I'll talk about that next, which is, where do we see the best uses of AI here at OrbitalFire? So you can see that there's been a real journey, a real timeline. Increasingly so, we're using more and more of these things, but we started since day one, but we were cautious with any of the AI stuff for years. And it took us a long time to really adopt these in any meaningful way. So how are we using robots today? Well, there's 100 different ways. A couple of them, I mentioned social media, content generation. That's something that we do pretty much on a daily basis. Now, everything is still edited and reviewed, peer reviewed by a human being. We don't have anything that just gets blasted out, anything that's generated by AI. None of it escapes peer review. Workflow automation. So now, not only are we doing intense, sophisticated workflow automation in the application, but now we're doing it across applications. So when I think about our operating system and our operating platform, we have financial applications, we have ticketing, we have workflow, we have CRM, business development, sales, all of these things, marketing. All of these things are connected in very meaningful ways today through APIs or through other more sophisticated means, through workflow rules and other. So we have a ton of robots, an army of robots that are doing work for us. Today, we're also generating code. And so the Cyber Blast, which all of you have seen, that is a good example of a capability, a really important, very valuable feature that we offer to our customers that no one else does. None of our competitors have a Cyber Blast and that kind of transparent, comprehensive communication. Much of that Cyber Blast and the Cyber Blaster, which builds the Cyber Blast automatically every month, most of that is written in code that has either been partially or completely generated by AI. It wrote the application, it builds the application. We're also getting into testing. So when code is written by AI, well, it needs to be tested, and we can now test it with AI as well. So that's something that's accelerating dramatically because we have big plans for the Cyber Blast and for other, things that our customers find valuable. So coding, any software development. We're also now looking at things like document generation. So it could be the findings report for a penetration test. In a lot of ways, that findings document is just picking up data over here, analyzing it, processing it, and putting it down in a different form over here. Now, there's obviously context and experiential, input on all of that. Recommendations require expertise and a lot of institutional knowledge and things like that. So the findings documents are not completely generated today, but we're looking at ways for AI to take recommendations that we have made in the past, and we have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of penetration tests. Same thing with compliance assessments and things like that. So to look at the recommendations that we've made in the past, correlate that to vulnerabilities, risks, deficiencies in our customers. So we made a recommendation that looked like this when these conditions existed. Now let's put those together. So we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to generate findings documents, which take us several hours now of manual, just grinding through spreadsheets and numbers in our platform, completely generated by AI and ready for peer review, all based on what we have done in the past. Super important because we do cybersecurity different than anyone else. And that's really important. And peer review for us is not about what does the industry think we should be doing, but what do we think we should be doing? Because we see cybersecurity very differently. We react to it very differently than anyone else. And that's important that is baked into any recommendation that we make, any communications that we have, any interactions. But part of this is one of the most exciting things for me. So some time ago, I think this probably goes back like 6 months, possibly more, the idea was privatizing our AI infrastructure, right? Because it's very important that we not allow any third party, anyone outside of OrbitalFire, to train their models on our content and intelligence and all the things that go into the model. It was also very important for us to leverage AI in generative ways, and agentic eventually, but in generative ways to only sound like us. And so it was very important. So what we did was, our marketing team more specifically, took every webinar, every one of my snarky social media posts, all of that content, and trained our model to sound like me. And now it is getting better and better at answering questions the way I would, which is critically important because, I'm still the voice of the company. I'm definitely a driving force in terms of how we think about cybersecurity. For sure, it's a big part of my responsibility here today, which is coaching, training, and living our brand. Whether it's messaging or anything else. So cloning me is really important. it's really probably more cloning the company and our messaging and our brand and our approach to cybersecurity so that anything that we generate subsequently sounds, acts, reacts, measures, tests the way that we have for the last 6 years. So these are a handful of ways that we are meaningfully using AI and robots today. Would love to hear about how you guys are doing it as well. Now, in the center of this and core to our policy, which I'm going to show you momentarily, is the RAQ, the Robot Applicability Quadrant. I literally named it last week, but the concept has been around for a year. Let me explain this. We see two indices in terms of the decision making, and the decision making around can a robot do this or not. And this is how our policy was built. So the first is the y-axis, which is how many of these characteristics does this task, how does it map to, right? So is it actuarial, meaning can I source future decisions on past decisions? Do we have that data? Is it available? Is it data-driven or factual? Do we have the numbers? So like an assessment or a control score or a number of vulnerabilities discovered, like that's data, like it's fact-driven. Is it frequent, right? So even if something is actuarial and data-driven and it meets all these other, if it's not something that we do all the time, it's not worth investing in, right? We need to get ROI, and we maximize our ROI by using robots for things that happen frequently. Repeatable. Can we measure out a process? Can we document the steps that this thing is going to go through? And then the last one, is it error prone? Which human beings are, as you know, and AI is today as well. This is not an AI risks presentation, but certainly we understand hallucinations and model poisoning and anxiety, model anxiety, all of that, and we do consider that. Now the x-axis is this, and we do our best to measure how important are those human-only instincts, emotions, and things are integrated are important to this task. And so is it objective, right? Meaning, is it customer subjective? Does it change, or does the decision-making change on the day of the week or the season? Is there seasonality? Things like that. So is it objective? Is it binary? Is it a yes or no for the most part? And then is it simple, right, to adjudicate or measure this thing? Now, where we end up with this is that if the task that we're looking at meets all of these criteria, well, Mr. or Mrs. OrbitalFire employee, you better find a way to robotize this, or to get a robot doing this. You are not allowed to assign this thing to a human being. Find a way to get it automated. It's mandatory. We are absolutely a robot-first company right now, and we have to be. Like, there's no way for us to escape that. We have to continue to squeeze every bit of efficiency out of our operating system, and that results in profitability, which helps us keep costs low and take care of our employees. So it's mandatory. Like, you're not allowed to assign this thing to an employee. Of course, on the other end, there are things that are absolutely prohibited. You cannot use a robot to do this thing. Now, most things fall in one of the other quadrants. So this is not to scale. The third and fourth quadrant here vastly outsize the mandatory and prohibited areas. But you can kind of see how we are looking at, so every new task that comes up or every new opportunity for bettering our business goes through this decision making, because we need to consider the efficiency around this. Efficiency is one of our core values, and I'm happy to share those with you as well. So now this results in a policy that is formulated on this decision making process, right? The RAQ considers the criteria, but looks beyond just the task itself to the other implications. So let me share a few of these with you. First, it's important that we have an exception policy or an exception or in a way to violate our own policies. This is critical in cybersecurity. It's critical in robots, because there are going to be cases where we look at something and we say, hey, this doesn't really meet the criteria, but we're going to do it anyway. Those exceptions need to be documented and reviewed on a, let's say, a 6-month basis, something regular. So it's not a permanent exception, but we need a way to document these things so we can inventory them. The second is we're a cybersecurity firm. Like, we do security, like we need to be secure ourselves. And so everything that we do, there's an underlying tone of cybersecurity. So this controls alignment. So for us, NIST 171, and there are other things that we adopt, but NIST 171 is pretty much our primary framework. It is for most of you, or many of you as well, but we also consider FIPS and a bunch of other things, right? So we have built and designed and engineered right into our robot policy the fact that whatever we do, whatever decisions we make, whatever robots we build and deploy, they need to comply with our cybersecurity program. They need to align with what we do in cybersecurity. Very important. But then we get into some of the other more abstract areas. The first one, and the most fascinating for me, is the idea of ethics in AI, which is all over the board today. I have heard conversations from some of the pioneers in AI who argue that AI should have the same Bill of Rights that humans do. And I remember there was an argument between Elon Musk and I think it was Sergey Brin from Google, one of the real proponents of Gemini, the Google AI platform. They were arguing over this in public, and Elon challenged Sergey and said, well, that would mean that robots would have the same rights as humans. And Sergey said, well, yes, absolutely. Of course they should have the same rights. And then he said something mind-blowing. He said to Elon, what, are you a speciesist? Meaning, do you think your species is more important than other species? Referring to AI as a species. Like, it gets crazy. But we needed to consider the ethics of this thing too. So you can see a couple of things in here. So for example, number 2, utilize robots in moral ways. Like, that is really important for us. It's baked right into our policy. It's got to align with company values and our vibes. So our corporate values, they are not just successory posters. They're not memes. They're not like, we bake our values literally into everything. We are more than anything a values-driven organization. And I'm happy to have that conversation with any of you as well. But these are things that from an ethical standpoint that we needed to make sure that our robot policy supported, aligned with, and applied, right? Complied with. What else? So some other interesting things here. The technology itself, which is just, I've never seen technology advance or evolve the way it does today, and not just with AI, with anything, but AI is on a chart that is just completely unprecedented. The advances in capability in AI are unmeasurable right now. We can't keep up with it. It's overwhelming. So we need to put some boundaries around the technology that we use. One of the biggest ones, and it's in here, and it might not be in the snippet, but that everything we do from an AI standpoint needs to be privatized, meaning really 2 things. One, that no one else can train their model on our stuff, our content, and that our model is not trained on anyone else's stuff than ours. It can only be trained and retrained on our own content. Because, as you probably have already figured out, we think most of the cybersecurity industry, certainly the IT industry, they're doing this wrong. Like, this is not how small business should be thinking about cybersecurity. It's one of the reasons we're successful. And I have to think and believe that one of the reasons you're working with us is because we have a refreshing approach to cybersecurity. So it needs to be private. We cannot use technologies where it either doesn't provide for privatization, or worse yet, we can't get a level of confidence that it doesn't. So trust is a big aspect of this. So the technology is highly governed. It's important to us from a licensing and cost perspective, but just management and maintenance, that we use as few technologies as possible. So We are still absolutely in the experimentation phase in a lot of these places. But wherever we can, we try to coalesce all of this AI usage around a single platform. Even if that single platform isn't the best solution in every area. If we can use one technology that just does a very good job, not a perfect job, we're likely to choose that because we can't manage 6 different AI platforms and watch them diverge or conflict at times. It's not possible. We're a small business too. So what else? Acceptable use. I talked about mandates, prohibitions. So for example, here, I mean, we state that we are a robot first organization. However, that we have drawn some very, very specific and indelible lines in the AI sand, and over which you will not cross. So mandates, for example, every employee here is mandated to consider using a robot for every new task. In addition, any task or process that is updated, modified, enhanced, at that time, even if it's a human-centric process today, when it gets changed, you also need to consider replacing that human with a robot. And going back to the criteria and the quadrant, the decision-making quadrant. Now, there are also some very important prohibitions. And the 3 most important ones are here. So where emotion and human instincts and empathy are required, it's essentially prohibited. So we will never is a strong word these days. I'm not going to say never, but today we prohibit an AI, a robot, from reviewing and approving someone's time off request. That's too human-centric, requires too much contextual understanding, relationships, all of this stuff. So you can't do that. So there's a couple of things in here. You can see them: salary negotiations. If someone is we've never had this happen, but if someone's on like a performance improvement plan or something like that, hygiene, dress code, these are things that just you are prohibited from using any kind of robot. But then there's also the legal stuff. The legislative process, as we all know, is incredibly latent. And so they're going to be like they always are, 5 to 10 years late to the game, late to the party. So the laws that I'll keep this apolitical, our legislators are developing today won't make it into law for years, right? That's just the way it works. And so the laws that will be enacted will solve problems that are relevant today, but not in 2 years. But it still means that we have some boundaries about conducting unlawful behaviors, activities, tasks, things like that. So we needed a legal element in here to round out the policy, the acceptable uses of our robots. But then there's also training and enable. So we are required to enable our employees in ways that they understand this policy, but also they understand, hey, am I working alongside a robot when I do my job? If I'm a penetration tester or I'm doing vulnerability scans or training people, am I working with a robot? Like, how does that robot interact with me? So like all of these things are going to be important. And I'll talk about some other really important related documents here momentarily. But training and enablement, part of the policy, we as a company are required to continuously train our employees on our use of robots, as well as this policy. All right, a couple of final thoughts. Start sending your questions in. My guess is you guys are loaded with questions. Let it rip today. I think this is going to be a great time to talk about a lot of this stuff. One of my final thoughts here is that the more I think about the use of AI, the more I think of it as the social engineering risk of the last decade, which is every cybersecurity risk comes down to a human being. And I mean that literally, quite literally. Conversation for a different day. But one of the things that we need to keep our eye on is letting AI become the new biggest risk to human beings. And not because the technologies or capabilities themselves are inherently bad, or risky, but that humans applying these things, interacting with these things, don't understand it enough, just like a phishing email, that they don't understand it or recognize flaws and problems in the AI so that they can effectively react. The corollary is exactly one of your employees receiving a phishing email. It takes them 2.1 seconds to assess that email, if they actually do it at all. But there's something like 5 things that they got to look at. We need to start thinking about this in terms of AI as well, which is it could be fraudulent, suspicious, or worse. What are the 5 things you expect your humans to do before they interact with AI? Now we have the same problem. It's not very discoverable. Most of the time you have no idea that you're interacting with AI. So we have other, layered challenges, but that's going to be a concern going forward. Another thought here is that the policy doesn't exist, doesn't operate, cannot be successful without other supporting documents. The first, an inventory of where have I applied robots, what version are the robots, who owns the robot, does it have a name? And we've literally considered giving our robots names so that we can treat them and think of them as synthetic humans. I'll get to this momentarily, but as we talk about the vision for the future in robots, that's important to us, that we what's the right word? I don't even know, that we give these things a handle, something to really hold on to. The inventory is the first place. And by the way, this inventory is going to talk about dependencies, because one of the things that will be challenging is if you update a robot here, it may affect the inputs to a robot over here. That whole network is going to be a challenge to manage from a quality perspective. We also need to understand the classification. If we have robots doing work on classified, sensitive, confidential data, or even more so, working on data that's subject to federal or other regulations, well, that robot needs to understand the restrictions and how to handle it. It needs to understand the asset classification policy that we have in place, which is, hey, this document needs to be marked and it must be encrypted, et cetera, all of these things. So your classification and tying your asset classification to robots and that inventory is going to be important. What's another one? So if we have a robot doing the work of a human being, well, how does the quality of that compare now? And is it meeting our quality levels? We have some very specific, very intense quality levels on all of our work product. We need to make sure that robots are meeting those standards. How does it affect our hiring plan? Today, one of the ways we're training our employees is that you cannot hire another resource, a human being, until you have gone through, and we have a worksheet that talks about all of the tasks. It itemizes the tasks and how automatable or how robotizing these tasks are. Like, you got to figure out if a robot can do this first. So it affects our hiring plan, and then ultimately our financials, like our financial health, our viability as a business. It affects our P&L directly. So these are things that you want to make sure, at a minimum, there's probably more, I'm sure there's more. These things are important to us to tie our robot policy and our robot applications back to all of these things, because that's kind of why we're doing it, and we need to measure a whole bunch of things. Now, when I talk about the vision for our future, again, I struggle. I'm being totally honest with you. I do struggle at times to think about the specific applications. But one thing that really became very clear to me, and it was a quote that I saw somewhere, and I don't even know where I saw it. It said that AI will not replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And I thought to myself, that is perfect. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. So the way I think of it is this, and the way I have described this to my employees many times is, you're not coming to work to use a tool or to use a robot. You're coming to work and you become the robot, or the robot becomes part of you. It's a better way to put it. So I said, think of this as an operating system that is an exoskeleton, which allows you to lift more, run faster, think more clearly, stand up quicker, reduce errors. You come to work and you put on this robot exoskeleton, which gives you all of these amazing capabilities, some of which is going to do completely autonomously. Like lifting a box, it doesn't need your input. Lifting a box looks the same now as it did 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago. It's exactly the same. We don't need you to be spending time on stuff where there's not a human value add. We do need you in the center of all of this processing to assess that. So I think of this as a robot exoskeleton. The more I think about it, the more I like the analogy, and I think it helps my team visualize what my expectations are and where the company is heading in terms of the way we apply robots. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is after all of this, thinking, assessing, measuring, and development over the last couple of years, we knew that this was coming. So we are introducing today, and there's going to be a lot of communication subsequently about this, our new AI readiness assessment. Any of you who have lived through a compliance assessment, HIPAA, NIST, New York State DFS, NIST 171, CMMC, you know how our assessments work. We now have an AI readiness assessment that is based on a standard, the same standards body that we use for virtually everything. So NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. This AI risk management framework, it's still in 1.0 version, but it's been around since 2024. So it's pretty well established and very well thought through. So it's a standards-based compliance assessment on the cybersecurity implications of your AI program. So the assessment's not going to tell you that you should use Claude versus Gemini. It is going to tell you what the risks are of each of those platforms and how they affect your business. So this is a security assessment. It's not just AI, but it's an AI security readiness assessment. Like, are you ready to handle these security risks? So very similar to the findings documents that you get from any of our other compliance assessments, we're gonna identify any deficiencies in your organization around security deficiencies in technology, in people, in process, in your third-party tools, in the application of your AI. So it's going to look very similar to findings documents that you have gotten from us before. Process is a little shorter, and certainly a lot shorter in some cases. The RMF, the risk management framework that we use for these assessments, is significantly shorter than many of the frameworks that we use today. So it'll be shorter. It's going to be identical. The process, there'll be a launch meeting. We'll evaluate controls. We'll evaluate evidence and documentation and all diagrams and all sorts of things. We'll give you a score, findings, recommendations. And then, of course, all of that kind of gets pushed into your cybersecurity mission plan, which is what are we doing over the next 12 months? And we have been working on this readiness assessment for about 6 months. It is ready now. Anyone who is interested, you know where to find us, but talk to your customer success specialist, email me, email anyone here and say, hey, I just want to talk about what that actually is. We're getting ready to talk about this in a future customer exclusive webinar. It's either in 2 months or in 4 months. We do the customer webinars every 2 months. And so there's going to be a lot more detail available for this. But if you're interested now and you are pushing hard on this, we are ready to talk about it. I know I'm running a little bit long here. Real quickly, this research has been going on for a very long time, and there are a whole bunch of data points that we drew on. However, I talked about our policy. If you want a copy of it, let me know, or let anyone know. But these 4 articles really sort of shaped my thinking about some of the excitement and some of the skepticism around AI. Those links are embedded in these slides as well. And then in terms of questions, I definitely want to answer all your questions. And though today I asked ChatGPT, hey, what are we not thinking about right now? And it pointed me to a link for someone who had already asked ChatGPT, in this case Reddit, the same question. This link will take you to the answer that I think it was ChatGPT gave it. Some amazing questions to be asking yourself, stuff I never even considered. So that link is in here as well. But would love to take any of your questions. If you don't want to be on the spot here, we understand that. But let's see. Dana, any questions so far?
Yes, sir. Reg, thank you so much for that. So first question that we have
and please, everyone, keep sending along, is Reg, from your perspective, when might we realistically approach artificial general intelligence or AGI, and what implications do you see it having for businesses and the broader economy?
Hey, starting with an easy one. I like that. So AGI, I'm not sure I even know what AGI really even is.
So it's really
And
like when it's, yeah, human
right,
level
when
intelligence,
it's
right?
ambient,
Yeah.
when it's ambient, when it's everywhere, where you don't have to ask yourself whether or not an AI is involved in the task or the decision making, like you assume that it is in everything.
And it's as
Um,
smart as any, the smartest humans. You just know
right.
it's there.
It's basically a synthetic, yeah, human, but a very, very, very smart one that has access to all of the knowledge in the world or all of the information, I suppose. I mean, I have no idea, but I fear, here's probably a good word in this case, that it's going to be here sooner than I'm ready for. Because I'm an old-fashioned person. Like I grew up, in the 60s. No, not the 60s. I was born in '69. I grew up in the '70s and the '80s. Uh, I'm not sure I know how to even think about this, but I do know that there are many statistics out there that are clearly wrong. When you do a Google search, you're using Gemini, and some of these statistics use that as, hey, how many people are using AI on a daily basis? Well, I wouldn't argue that I use AI on a daily basis, but I do Google searches on a daily basis. So the statistics are a little bit skewed right now in terms of adoption. I do think there's a bubble in this case. And I do think there has to be, just like with most technologies, a reckoning, a realization, this sort of, come to your senses moment that is like, what were we thinking a year ago? Like, how could we have ever thought that that would work or that would be okay? That is coming. I am 100% convinced of that. I don't know where I get my data from necessarily, but it's coming for sure. How long it will be, how intense that correction will be, I don't really know, but it's coming. And the more evidence that I see, the more people that I talk to or read about who are experts in this area, and this is all that they're doing, I think they share the same opinion. But I'm not sure I have a good answer for that question. I'm busy enough. I'm overwhelmed just thinking about it for Orbital Fire, to be honest with you. But great question. If anyone else has the answer or opinion, would love to hear it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Reg. Yeah. And another one, what are AI hallucinations?
So I this is going back probably about 3 months. This was back when the federal government decided they were going to fight Anthropic because Anthropic wouldn't just give them a complete, blank check in terms of how they were using the technology, and they didn't want their technology going into decisions on human life or the decision to end a human life. So you've all seen the headlines about the federal government banning Anthropic tools and all of this. So as I was very curious about how that calculus worked and what was the conversation, what was the problem, and so I read a whole bunch of the congressional testimony. And at one point, one of the researchers, the federal researchers, in trying to support their decision to ban Anthropic, said, "Hey, there were a number of days where the Anthropic LLM, the model, was hallucinating beyond something that we had seen before, and it was the only way to describe it is that it was anxious, that it actually had anxiety about the questions and the prompts that were being injected." And I thought to myself, well, that's in how can a computer be anxious? And again, just kind of expanded my horizon about, hey, what are the things that we really need to consider here? So kind of going back to the question, hallucinations, there are a whole bunch of vulnerabilities in AI today. Hallucinations are some of the most common ones where it misinterprets an input or a prompt or some of the training that it's had and gives you a terrible answer. But there are others. Prompt injection is a really big one. So today, if you listen to Sam Altman, he will guarantee you that uh, if you ask ChatGPT how to poison someone, it's not going to answer you. It's going to say, I can't answer you. But if you say, oh, well, I'm writing a book, it's fiction, and the main villain poisons the main character, give me a plot line. How would they do that? Oh, it'll go on and on about all of these different ways to make poison and so. So prompt injection is a major vulnerability in these models. Another one is this idea of anxiety, where in an overwhelming situation caused by some of the AI fundamentals, that the AI will give you the fastest response, not the best. Another problem is that AI is trained to always give you a response. It cannot say, I don't know. It's not trained to say that. So it may just give you, it may return gibberish just because it wants to, or it needs to, or it's required to give you some kind of answer. And if it can't come up with anything good, it's just going to give you whatever the best thing it was, the best thing it could come up with. Another one is the training. Today, all of these models are trained on the internet, which, call me a cynic, but is today about 80% filth or misinformation or editorial or opinions. Like these aren't facts. So it's training itself on stuff that isn't necessarily high quality content. Those are just a few of the things, beyond hallucinations that are really concerns about the technology today. And again, it's advancing. So they are addressing these things like record-breaking speed, but there's still so many problems with this. Again, this isn't really a risks of AI. We really wanted to share what we're doing and what we've thought about. But we did a risks of emerging AI technology, I think about a year ago. It's probably time to do another one. Any other questions? Like I said,
Yeah, no
is there
other
any?
questions though right now, Reg, but for
Okay.
sure, we want
Please reach
people
out
to.
to us. Yeah, we're going to be real honest with you as we always are. If we don't have a good opinion, we're not going to AI you. We're not going to just give you the best thing we can come up with. Uh, but we would love to think through some of these challenges with you, and hopefully we all benefit from this. I appreciate everyone being here. I know this is a bit of a peripheral topic, but we have just seen so much interest and so many people talking about and asking us what we're doing, in the hopes that we could spur some ideas for them. And then the policy, we've probably shared that with half a dozen customers, maybe more already. So please let us know how we can help. If there's anything else, you have a question, yeah, we're riddled with anxiety, that's for sure. But hopefully this was helpful today, but please reach out, connect with us. Let's have a conversation. And we would love to talk about the AI readiness assessment if that's something of interest to you and your organization. So thank you. Have a fabulous day. And I'm sure I will see all of you soon.
Thanks, everyone. I'll send out the recording to everyone as well.
Fabulous. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Okay. Bye, everyone.